Hello everybody, it's Verda here, and today we're going to be benchmarking ESO using the RTX 3060 Ti 8GB graphics card with the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D CPU. I have the CPU undervolted by -30. We're pairing this up with 32GB of DDR5 6000MHz RAM. So with that out of the way, let's have a look at the settings that we're going to start with here. So we're going to begin at 1080p. I'm using the maximum graphical quality preset, though I am going to make some quick changes here. So we're going to go from TAA to DLAA. I'm also going to go ahead and turn off the distortion effect, and I'm going to turn depth of field off, and I'm going to do that for all of the testing. I'm going to do that for every single time if they get enabled by the preset, because I don't like those settings and I don't think many people will play with distortion and depth of field on. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? So before we actually start benchmarking, I want to give you some important information to do with the benchmarks in my game. So I have gone ahead and manually uncapped the FPS inside the config file. I believe ESO has a FPS cap of 100. I've gone ahead and set that to 240. I know some people might not like that I'm setting an FPS cap at 240, but realistically, who is playing at above 240 or even at 240 FPS? Also, I'm going to quickly show you my add-ons. Here they are. Go ahead and, pause the video if you want to see my add-ons. Most of them are just daily writs and just daily things and crafting and quality of life and endgame raiding add-ons and stuff. So those are my add-ons. Most of us are going to have a lot of these add-ons anyways, but I do want to note it because they do affect performance. And for the benchmarks, I'm going to be using the world anchors inside of Dshan because it's very consistent to benchmark here. It's a very reliable place to come and benchmark. They're also one of the most intensive areas, if not the most intensive area to be in the game, other than like PvP, which is very inconsistent. I might not run into people. I might not be able to find large-scale combat in PvP, so it's not really reliable. Also, endgame raids would probably be a very good place to go ahead and benchmark, but the problem with that is I'm not an active ESO player. I haven't been playing ESO for over a year, so it's not really fair for me as a tank to go ahead and try and join endgame raids when I forgot the mechanics and so on. It wouldn't be that consistent because I would have to go to different raids, which would change the performance. So yeah, we're just going to stick to world anchors. For the first benchmark at 1080p Ultra, I am going to go ahead and go into a dungeon as well, just to see what the performance is like. But if the performance is really, really high, then I'll just stick to the world anchors inside of Dshan. So I just wanted to get all that out of the way, but I just wanted to give you all that information at the start so you know exactly what we're working with here. So let's get started, shall we? All right, Dolmen started. It's quite there's not as many people here as there usually is. Oh, there we go. People actually turning up. I have to try and remember how to play. It's been a while, guys. Yeah, there's not really that much to do here for a tank, these world anchors, or dolmens as they're called. Yeah, as you can see, we are clearly GPU bound here at Ultra, which I was expecting, even at 1080p. Surprisingly though, ESO takes a ton of CPU performance. Look at this, we're at pretty much 45-50% sometimes. It's crazy. When I used to play ESO, I played it on my old gaming PC, and I always had a CPU bottleneck. It was really, really bad. But yeah, as you can see here, the FPS when we're actually in fights at the Dolmen is around 120, but you do need a pretty beefy CPU, it would seem, to get this kind of FPS. But let's try a dungeon and see what the performance is like there, and if it's really too high, I'll just stick to Dolmens for the rest of the benchmark. Best thing about playing a tank, watch this, guys. All you DPS in chat, just crying. Man, it feels good to be a tank. I believe I've got my old dungeon raiding set on, to be honest. So, we should be... I don't really remember this dungeon, but we should be fine. The quest. Oh, for fuck's sake. Fine. I think this is going to take ages. Come on, then. Let's go. Let me see if I can remember how to do this. Alright. Man, it is. I'm so rusty. I'm casting spells in like the wrong orders and everything, but performance feels totally fine here. It's definitely higher than the Dolmen, so we'll stick to the Dolmens, I think. There's some stutters every now and then, it would seem, which is not ideal. Ah, I'm kind of remembering my spells now. Man, I'm so bad. I'm so bad right now, jeez. The raid is done. So on average in the dungeon, I was getting around 165 FPS. 1% loads were around 116 all the way through. GPU bound the entire way through, which is to be expected. But also, as you can see, the CPU usage was significantly lower than when we were at the Dolmen. So we're just going to stick to the Dolmen since it takes a lot more performance to actually play there. I just wanted to see what it would be like inside of a dungeon though. Let's go back to a Dolmen at 1440p, shall we? So now we're at 1440p. Still using the maximum preset, but we have the distortion turned off with the depth of field turned off. Let's go ahead and see what the performance is like here at the Dolmen. There's not really that much for me to do here as a tank, to be honest with you. But look at my CPU usage, 40% here at the Dolmen. Clearly my GPU is the bottleneck. We're at around 90 FPS. The Dolmens are definitely the most intensive area in the game just because of how many people are here casting spells, right? You can make it less intensive by having spells hidden and so on, but for the sake of playing at Ultra, obviously we want to be playing at the Ultra settings or maximum settings. So 1% lows are around 80. Average FPS is at around 100, but as you can see, when a lot of spells are being cast in an area, it goes down to like the low 80s. Still more than playable for ESO. Yeah, I would definitely say this is totally fine for 1440p maximum settings. Let's go ahead and try it out at 4K, shall we? Okay, so now we're at 4K using the maximum preset. Let's go ahead and see what this is like. We're already at like 60, 70 FPS here before the Dolmen even starts, so a little bit scary. FPS is dropping to the 50s right now, which is definitely noticeable. Yeah, I used to play ESO at about this FPS, if not lower at this area, because I used to be very much CPU bound when I played ESO on my old gaming PC. Man, 50s, 40s, I wouldn't say 4K is playable here. At least not in this area. Maybe in dungeons it's completely fine. Also, endgame raids are less intensive. You do have a lot less players, though you do have the particle effects of like the endgame raid mobs and bosses and stuff, but still. I personally wouldn't want to play a Dolmen like this, but I guess if you were going to play 4K maximum settings, you could just lower some settings down when you are doing Dolmen runs. You know, it is a very niche activity. When we're not actually doing that, we're getting around 70 here just running around, which is pretty nice for sure. Let's try the next preset, shall we? So now we're going to benchmark 1080p using the maximum setting preset still, but we're using DLSS at quality this time. So I'm interested to see if we can actually hit 240 FPS all the time here at the Dolmen. I don't think we will, but let's give it a try. Oh man, particle effects galore. But it looks like I'm actually getting CPU bound here, even at 1080p. I'm getting CPU bound sometimes with DLSS. Average FPS are around 175, but yeah, I'm dropping my GPU is actually dropping. There is a lot going on though. It's crazy just how CPU intensive the ESO is at this Dolmen, right? Depends how many people are here, of course, but yeah, average FPS are about 170, 1% lows of 70, so quite low 1% lows. CPU usage is at 50+% right now, which is quite high, so to get these kinds of frames, you do need to have a pretty beefy CPU. It does seem as though ESO is way more intensive on the CPU, which I already knew because I used to play with a much less powerful CPU and I was constantly CPU bottlenecked. But let's try out 1440p, shall we? See if we're still CPU bound with DLSS. So we're at 1440p. Maximum preset, DLSS quality. Let's go ahead and see if we're still CPU bound. What is my horse doing? Come on, we gotta get to the Dolmen before it finishes. Go, 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 go. It's nice to see that we're not CPU bound when we're not at a Dolmen though. Did I get here late? No, I'm here on time. We can still do this. I'm actually gonna start counting my FPS at the Dolmen to keep looking at the particles. We do drop GPU usage sometimes, but for the most part, it seems like even with DLSS at 1440p, we're still going to be GPU bound, which is quite nice to see, in all honesty. So yeah, we're still at 50% CPU usage roughly, but it looks like we are going to be GPU bound here at 1440p at Dolmen's, at least for the most part, which is quite nice to see. It does mean that pretty much all the content in ESO is going to be bottlenecked by the 3060 Ti at 1440p DLSS because the Dolmens are so intensive, it's crazy. If we were in dungeons, we'd be getting more FPS, and also we would be definitely GPU bound, not CPU bound in dungeons and endgame raids. There's just a whole lot less going on inside of those. Let's try 4K, shall we? Right, so now we're at 4K using the maximum preset still, DLSS quality. Let's try it out. Alright, the Dolmen's starting. I just reset my FPS counter here, so it's just accurate for the Dolmen itself. It's a nice increase already, but we need to see more spells being cast. We're at 80 FPS here, guys. It's not bad at all, actually. For 4K, maximum settings, even if we have DLSS on quality mode, yeah. I was expecting less. You know, 80, 90 FPS. Dropping into the 70s here, but like I said before, realistically, if we were in dungeons or doing any other kind of content that was not Dolmen's, we would be seeing a lot more FPS from our GPU here for sure. I was seeing around 90 FPS when I was just running around the world, 100 FPS sometimes. Even right now, we're in the 80s with all these spells. Drop down to the 65 FPS range there. Not amazing, but definitely more than playable for a game like ESO. Yeah, watch when we're all just like running around and stuff. We're at 90 to 100 FPS. at 4K. That's pretty impressive, I would say, for sure. If this doesn't prove that ESO really is not that GPU intensive, I don't know what will. It's pretty much just CPU intensive. We're going to try 4K performance though, because why not? All right, so now we're going to test 4K maximum settings, but we got the DLSS set to performance since you can get away with that at 4K resolution. So let's go ahead and try it out, see what kind of FPS we see. Let me on my horse. I can't be running around on foot here. I'm a tank, I'm way too slow. Come on. All right, let's reset our FPS counter at the Dolmen here. There we go. Honestly, visually, I can't really see that much of a difference from quality DLSS to performance. I think the game still looks fine. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Obviously, YouTube changes the quality a bit, like butchers it, I should say. But I do upload my videos at a pretty high bit rate, so yeah, it should help. We're seeing averages of around 100 FPS, which is really good. 1% lows at 80, which is totally fine. And honestly, this looks fine to me. It doesn't look bad. It does not look bad at all, considering we're playing at performance DLSS. I think at 4K in a lot of games, it's completely fine to play at performance DLSS. It's really game dependent, but here in ESO, the image quality still looks really good. And as you can see, when we're not actually doing a dolmen and we're just running around with people and stuff, even though there's a lot of people here, we're still at about 130 FPS, which is so good. So let's go ahead and try out the next preset, shall we? So now we're going to be benchmarking 1080p using the Ultra preset. I'm going to go ahead and change the AA to DLSS again. And I'm also going to go ahead and turn off the distortion, and I'll turn off the depth of field again. But other than that, everything else is on the Ultra preset. Let's try it out. All right, so this Dolmen's starting, so I'm just going to reset my FPS counter here so we get an accurate benchmark for the Dolmen. And I'm just going to be as useless as possible here. I don't really feel like a tank has that much to do at the Dolmen, to be honest. Like, this is very much a DPS, you know, a DPS thing. I don't even think people would mind if I just stood still, because I don't give much value here, especially when I'm not in a group. At Ultra 1080p, we're still GPU bound here at the Dolmen, which is nice to see. Average FPS currently, we're at about 110, I would say, in all honesty, during this fight. And also 1% lows of 90, so it feels more than fine. And honestly, going from maximum settings to Ultra, I can't really see a difference. Graphically, I don't really notice it that much. You know, when there's so much going on, you're focusing so much on making sure your dots are up all the time and all that stuff, and just making sure all your spells are up. So it's just kind of like, you don't really look at the game that much, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's more than playable here at Ultra. And we're still GPU bound, so once I start to become really CPU bound, I'll stop testing 1080p and I'll just stick to 1440 and 4K until I see that they're CPU bound as well. So let's go ahead and try out 1440p though. Okay, so at 1440p, Ultra preset, DLAA, you know the standard. Dolmen's just beginning. Let's go ahead and reset my FPS counter here for the Dolmen. Apply some buffs. Quite a few people just standing here, but that's normal. Honestly, I think I could just stand here and just track my FPS and people wouldn't mind, because there's really nothing for me to do. I've been playing for quite a while now, and we're still at only around 15.5 gigs of RAM usage, so definitely more than playable on a 16 gigabyte computer for sure. We got an average FPS here of 90 at 1440p, so we lost about 20 FPS from 1080p on average. Maybe not 20, maybe 15 FPS. It was about that much. We lost about 15, 20 FPS. 1% lows of 75, so still more than fine for sure. More than playable, guys. Let's get to 4K, shall we? All right, so now we're testing out 4K resolution with the Ultra preset, DLAA. Let's continue. Dolmen's just starting. Got to get over there and reset my FPS counter. Come on, guys. All right, so we're at the Dolmen, and we're actually getting a lot less FPS here, but it looks like there's way more people casting spells, so that could be it. And I know there's going to be some people like, that's not consistent, and it's really difficult for me to give you consistent FPS here in ESO, because if I go the only real way for me to give you consistent FPS is if I was to go to my guild house or player house and just hit a test dummy with spells, and that's just not accurate to the kind of performance you can expect to see here in ESO. It's just not going to be nowhere near as intensive as playing out in the actual open world with other players or in a group or doing endgame raids. So this really is the best way that I can provide you an accurate benchmark, even if the performance does fluctuate. Like, as you can see here, I think I'm getting similar or worse FPS here at 4K with the Ultra than I did on maximum, and that's just simply because I can physically see there's way more players here, but I can't control that, obviously. There's no real control environment I can give you here. It's not like I can get, a whole group together like an endgame raid and just keep doing the same stuff and just for the benchmark. It's just not realistic. So this is kind of the best I can do, unfortunately, for benchmarking ESO. So, but with that, let's go ahead and benchmark 1080p with DLSS, shall we? So now we're going to benchmark 1080p ultra preset with DLSS set to quality. Let's hurry up and get over there before it ends. All right, I'm just going to reset my FPS counter here. I can probably just throw down caltrops for the debuff. But yeah, as you can see, we are actually CPU bound at the Dolmen here at around 140 FPS when stuff starts to get really intensive. CPU usage around 55-60%. Yeah, completely CPU bound here at 140 FPS. So it looks like for the 7800X 3D, at least at the Dolmen, the absolute max FPS you're going to get is around 144 with this many players. So, or with this many spells being cast. Average FPS 150 actually, but yeah, it does dip down. That's fairly interesting. Even now that we're not casting any spells, just with this many people on screen, still CPU bound at around 150 FPS. So I guess that's the limit with this many people, which is definitely more people than an endgame raid. So, and way more spells being cast than an endgame raid. But interesting to see nonetheless. 1% low is pretty consistent at around 70 again. But let's try out 1440p, shall we? Alright, so now we're using 1440p at the Ultra preset using DLSS quality. Let's see the performance, guys. Apparently my ping is outrageous. Shouldn't be. Alright, Dolmen's just starting. Let's go ahead and reset our FPS here real quick. Still a lot of players, as to be expected. The Dolmens pretty much have players on them 24/7. VRAM usage has creeped up just above 4.1 gigs actually, so there might be some stutters here with the 4 gig card. And I actually do have a 4 gigabyte graphics card, so I could test that later on maybe in another video for sure. We're still completely, I think we're just borderline GPU bound because we're at about 140, 150 FPS. I didn't see the GPU usage drop, but that, you know, it may have dropped. I just didn't spot it. 1% loads are around 100. Still more than playable, absolutely. But interesting. I thought we would actually see a little bit of a CPU bottleneck, but no CPU bottleneck. Try 4K, shall we? Right, so we're here now with 4K using ultra presets with DLSS quality. Let's try it out. I'm hoping for around 80 to 90 FPS roughly. Oh, Dolmen's starting, come on. Oh man, that guy's got a slow horse, feels bad, man. Alright, let's start the FPS counting. There we go. Oh man. So we're actually getting very similar frame rate to maximum settings. And I think we've got similar amount of players here. There might be more players here actually. That might be why we're seeing similar FPS to maximum settings. The average is at around 70, 74 FPS actually. 1% lows of around 64. So it's really consistent. Obviously, if the 1% lows were dropping down to the 40s and stuff, you know, it might feel awful, but yeah, the frame time graph is really, really smooth, as you can see. CPU usage about 40% here with this many people. Completely fine. Let's set it to performance, shall we? So now we're at 4K resolution, ultra settings still, with the DLSS set to performance. Let's try it out. All right, let's reset our FPS counter. There's definitely more people coming on. It's like it's just past 1:30 p.m. So it seems like a lot of people are getting online now. I purposely didn't benchmark this early on in the morning because I knew there'd be a lot less people. So I just wanted to make sure that we do get an accurate representation as to the performance you can expect, right? But going from quality DLSS to performance, it looks like we're actually getting quite a large jump in performance here. We got about a 20% increase in FPS, if not more, maybe 20-25%. This, yeah, I keep saying it, but this is completely fine. Like, honestly, if you play ESO, you can get away with playing with a 3060 even at 4K resolution if you don't mind playing at around 100 FPS, which I personally would not mind. So now we're going to start benchmarking 1080p using the high preset. I'm going to switch to Nvidia DLAA again, and I'm also going to turn off the distortion and depth of field effects. So let's see what kind of performance we can expect here. All right, so the Dolmen's starting. Let's go ahead and just throw down some buffs. I'm interested to see if we're actually going to be GPU bound or CPU bound here, because, you know, at ultra using DLSS quality, we were actually getting CPU bound. Doesn't look like it so far, but there's more and more players coming, so more and more particle effects for sure. No, we're still completely GPU bound here at high. I actually was not going to test 1080p high here at native resolution because we saw that 1080p ultra with DLSS quality was CPU bound, so I was gonna just ignore it, skip it and benchmark 1440p high and 4K high, but no, we're still GPU bound here. I did see the GPU usage go down by 1%, so maybe a tiny CPU bottleneck. Now going from ultra to high preset at 1080p, the only difference that I saw is I can't really tell the quality is not that bad. I think it's completely fine still, but I am seeing some things pop in. For example, let me show you these bushes here. Can I give you an example? Yeah, you see those goats over there? It's very small, but you do see some pop-ins. You see those trees and stuff, they disappear. It looks fine in my opinion. Let's try out 4K. Let's try out 1440p, shall we? So now we're at 1440p with the high preset DLAA. Let's try it out. Get to the dolmen. Get to the dolmen. Right, let's reset our FPS counter. There we go. Drop some caltrops. Really don't need to do anything else here, I don't think. There's not much for me to do here. Also, just before I started like recording this and benchmarking it, I've been thinking about getting back into ESO, but I had this really annoying bug which has literally taken me ages to try and fix. I've tried all sorts of solutions, and what it was this setting here in this setting right here, custom UI scale, that kept resetting itself, which was so annoying. And I had no idea how to fix it. I tried so many solutions. I finally managed to fix it. But basically, I used to play at 1080p only, and now I play at 1440p. So obviously, I need to change the UI scale for my add-ons and stuff with that setting, and it just kept resetting. It was so annoying. But yeah, anyway, I got off track there a little bit. But at the Dolmen, around 110 FPS on average, with the 1% lows of 80. Still completely GPU bound, obviously. Totally fine. Let's try 4K with the high preset now, shall we? I just TP'd to the wrong Dolmen. Whoops. Alright guys, so we're at 4K resolution, ultra preset, DLAA. Let's, sorry, not ultra preset, high preset, DLAA. Let's get to the Dolmen quick. Go, go, go. Alright, let's reset our FPS counter and throw our legendary ability called caltrops. Yes! Spam them. I know only one can be on the ground at any given point, but I just want to feel like I'm doing something, you know? Woo! Look at that FPS. It did not increase much, did it, from ultra? It definitely did increase. It definitely did. We are getting an increase here, around 5 FPS maybe 6 FPS difference from ultra to high. So there is that. It's not much though. 60 FPS here when nothing is going on. I say nothing, but people are spamming spells. Yeah, it's still not very good here. You definitely need to use DLSS with the 3060 Ti with 4K. Even at high settings. I say even at high like it's not high settings, but 1% lows are still quite low. It's noticeable. Yeah, it's noticeable. Let's throw on some DLSS, shall we? So now we're at 1080p with the high settings, DLSS set to quality. See what kind of FPS we can see here. Dolmen. Which Dolmen is it, guys? I think it's this one. Guys, I've gone to the wrong Dolmen again. I keep doing it. I've literally been here for maybe an hour and I'm still going to the wrong Dolmens. My god. Yeah, as you can see, we are hitting that 240 FPS cap that I did set in the game. Like I said, I don't think anybody's playing with more than that in ESO, so we're not going to go above that for sure. At the Dolmen, I've just reset my FPS counter. The reason I keep resetting my FPS here at the Dolmen is so I can get an accurate reading of the average FPS while we're here. And it's not inflated by running around and stuff, you know, on the horse. Wait, are we GPU bound somehow? What? No way. I wasn't watching it. I probably should be paying more attention to the GPU usage. Ooh, big lag spike there, big stutter. Oh my god, we're still GPU banned. Apparently, the people here that are casting spells, they're not casting as intensive spells, I guess. That's really bizarre. Yeah, we're gonna go to another Dolmen and we're gonna try it again because like that did not seem right. We were getting GPU bound at maximum settings, ultra quality DLSS. How are we not getting GPU bound here at high settings DLSS? That makes no sense. It's literally more intensive. Maybe it's something to do with the shadows actually for the CPU. I didn't think of that. Yeah, I didn't actually think of that. That could be what's causing it, the shadows and stuff. Yeah, it's most likely what it is actually. But 1080p DLSS, man, we're getting 200 FPS here on average. That is insane. 1% lows are about 110. Look at that CPU usage, guys. 60%. 60% CPU usage. Jesus Christ. So even if you have a 3060 Ti, if you don't have a monster CPU, you're not going to get these frames. At the Dolmen, at least. If you're not at the Dolmen, you're just doing normal stuff, yeah, you'll get good FPS. But my god, was not expecting this. Let's try 1440p now. Alright guys, so we're at 1440p with the high presets using DLSS quality. Alrighty, here we are. Let's reset my FPS counter real quick. You're actually getting like 150 FPS in this place. Performance can fluctuate quite heavily depending on many factors in ESO, but there's probably more intensive spells being cast or just more people here, I guess. It's really hard to say. It's really hard to tell how many people are in an area for sure. Like, look how many people are here. But around 140 FPS, I mean, it's totally fine. Still completely GPU bound though. No CPU bottleneck once again. 1% lows of 150 FPS. I don't know what to say, guys. It's completely fine. It's completely playable. Let me switch to 4K now. All right, so we're at 4K resolution, high preset, quality DLSS. See the performance, guys. And would you believe it? I actually teleported to the correct Dolmen. Wow, look at me. Ta-da. Right, here we are. Oh my God. I've reset my FPS counter for the Dolmen. Look at my VRAM usage. We're actually at 4.3, 4.4 gigs VRAM usage here. So yeah, I think you definitely need a 4 gig card to play ESO with the higher settings for sure. At least minimum, right? I will have to try it out on my old graphics card for sure. Because I can't remember the FPS exactly. But then again, I was completely CPU bound on my old systems. There is that. Average FPS of just under 90, 70 FPS on average here. Pretty good stuff. Let's swap it to the performance DLSS, shall we? Alright guys, so now we're at 4K using the high preset still with the performance DLSS. Let's see if we can hit maybe 120, 130 FPS. That'd be quite nice. I mean, we can hit 120 here. 125, 130 nearly, come on. Oh, 132, 137, oh my. But yeah, when we're actually at a Dolmen, it's not going to be that high. For sure. All right, so we're at a Dolmen. Let's reset our FPS counter. 110. Okay, so yeah, about 20, 30 FPS more so far than quality DLSS. And quite a bit more FPS than playing at native 4K, that's for sure. Caltrops for the win. Yeah, average 110 FPS. With 1% lows of just under 90. This is still fine for 4K, guys. Absolutely. Look at me just walk away before the fight's even over. So that's going to do it for today's video, guys. We're not going to benchmark any lower than the high preset. I just feel like at 1080p, you can honestly play at maximum settings without DLSS with the 3060 Ti completely fine. Yes, at the Dolmen, you're going to lose some FPS, but the Dolmen is pretty much the most intensive area in the game. Maybe other than PvP if it's a massive battle, but they don't really exist anymore these days, at least I don't think they do. So yeah, the Dolmens are pretty much the most intensive areas you're going to be at. Inside the dungeons, I was getting much higher FPS, like 170, 180, which is already way more than you need for ESO for sure. But that's going to do it for today's video. It was getting very, very long and very, very repetitive to test the same thing again and again. I think you get the gist of how it's going to run in ESO. So that's going to do it for today, guys. I've been the FPS tester, aka Verdict. If you found any use out of this video, go ahead and leave it a like. It really does help me with YouTube. And subscribe if you haven't already. Leave me a comment below if you feel like I missed something, or if you've got a suggestion for another game to benchmark. And until next time, guys, take care and goodbye for now.